Hi everyone, welcome to our mammal behavior and reproduction video. By the end of this video, you'll be able to compare the different mating systems exhibited in mammals and the adaptive advantage of each, explain delayed implantation and diapause and the adaptive advantage, compare the growth and development of oviparous and viviparous mammals, the different mating systems of mammals. So monogamous mammals account for just 2 to 4% of all mammals, and that's when there's one male and one female. So pretty low percentage. And actually, research has shown that even those mammals that have monogamous bonding, there are often extra pair copulations that occur. So there's a pair bond, but then there's still mating with other individuals of their same species outside of that. Females, when monogamy happens, when females are widely dispersed, so it's not easy to come across a mate. And so if females are widely dispersed, having that one-to-one pair bond ensures reproduction. Or when parental care, like a lot of parental care is necessary. So mammals do parental care in general, but when there's a lot needed from both parents, then you see that monogamy. One great example of monogamy in mammals is the California mouse that mates for life. So polygamy, having more than one mate, is far more common in mammals. And of those mammals that are polygamous, polygyny is most common. So that's one male, multiple females. And you'll see that across many species of mammals. In elk, a female elk will mate with several males each day of breeding season. So that's an example of polyandry. So one female, multiple males. And there are some mammals, and this again is not super common, but some mammals are promiscuous, where individuals will mate with any member of the opposite sex. So this would mean during breeding season, anytime they come across a member of the opposite sex, breeding occurs. And even in species that we consider promiscuous, there's evidence that it's not completely promiscuous, that there could be some competition among different potential mates, but in general, there's much less selection in those species that we consider promiscuous. And snowshoe hares are an example of that. Mammals do some interesting things to attract mates using smell, sounds, and sight. Smell. There are some mammals that have scent glands that are specific for emitting pheromones to send signals to conspecifics to lure them in. And that is seen especially in nocturnal species, where especially sight might not come into play as much. Some mammals use sound. So whether it's howling, bellowing, elk bugling, barking, roaring, squeaking, different sounds can either attract mates or kind of establish a territory. So when elk bugle, it's to establish their territory, to tell other males. So just the males bugle to tell other males, don't enter my territory. This area here is for me to be mating in. The biggest example for kind of sight cues in mammals are of antlers. And so remember, antlers we see mostly on males of cervids. And so those are used both for sex recognition and for kind of quality determination. How big are the antlers? How symmetrical are they? So that's to attract mates and to compete with other males. Remember, caribou, both males and females have antlers, but the females are much smaller. Breeding and gestation. Some mammals don't have a specific breeding season. Examples, elephants, rhinos, giraffes, and humans. but many mammals are seasonal breeders. So there's a specific time of the year when it is their breeding season. Deer and small mammals fall into this category. And typically it's an increase in photoperiod for small mammals that triggers their breeding season. And then the quantity and quality of food available will determine the timing of reproduction and the litter size. So it kind of, for some species, it determines when they'll mate. So they need to kind of have enough, maybe a big enough layer of fat, enough energy stored so that they can reproduce. And then also litter size, it makes sense. The more food they've been able to find, they have more energy to put in to their young, and they might have a larger litter if they've been better fed. Pheromones definitely can affect breeding behavior. Gestation time is the amount of time from conception to birth. So when mating happens to when the young are born. And there's a very wide range among mammals. For the opossum, it's 12.5 days from mating to birth. We'll talk a little bit more about that. In an elephant, it takes 24 months, 2 full years of gestation before baby elephants are born. Another kind of extreme range is when we look at how many litters per year, how often different species of mammals will give birth. The meadow vole can have up to 17 litters per year, whereas elephants will only have 1 young every 4 to 5 years. So some are reproducing a ton, and probably in those cases, survival is not high. Others put in a lot of energy to reproduce, but only reproduce sporadically. But there's a much higher chance of survival in those species. These are Virginia opossum, little tiny babies. That's how big they are when they are born. Delayed implantation is seen in many mammal species. And so what happens is mating happens, and then the implantation of the embryo doesn't happen until much later. So for some species, they'll mate right after they've given birth in 1 year, so that they're technically pregnant, right? But they don't go through gestation, all the gestation right away. It's delayed. Implantation happens later, and it ends up being about a year later that they give birth. So diapause is that period of time when a female is holding on to the fertilized embryo, but development is suppressed. And the reason for this, the adaptive advantage of this, is that it allows young to be born when the probability of survival is highest. So let's say breeding season is spring or summer, when the weather's nice, animals are moving, there's plenty of food to eat, things are great, breeding happens. If gestation started then, if implantation started then and the embryo developed, in many species, the young would end up being born in November, December, January, having another mouth to feed in those months, another individual to keep warm. It isn't always practical for these animals. So breeding happens when everything's nice, then delayed implantation. Implantation might happen in October, November, and then over winter is when the embryo is developing inside the mother's body, so that birth can happen at the beginning of spring. Kangaroos are a pretty interesting example of development and of young over different years. So kangaroos, it's possible for them to have an embryo in their uterus in diapause, so hanging out, a joey in the pouch, like attached on, suckling, and a nursing young kangaroo that's outside the pouch but still comes back to nurse. So that's a pretty unique example. Usually most mammals wait until they've totally weaned one young to have the next set. We're going to go through the growth and development of the 3 different subclasses of mammals. So the monotremes exhibit ovipary, so they lay eggs. Duck-billed platypus and echidnas are examples. Duck-billed platypus is found in Australia and Tasmania. Tasmania is part of Australia, but it's a separate island. So they're on both of those islands. Duck-billed platypus gives birth, lays 2 eggs, incubates them for 10 to 14 days, and the young are born altricial. Remember, altricial means they cannot fend for themselves. This is super interesting to me. Monotremes do not have nipples, and so milk kind of seeps out of their skin, and it'll pool on the mother's stomach, and the young drink the milk off the stomach of the mother. After about 4 months of being in the burrow with mom, duck-billed platypus young will leave the burrow. For echidnas, there's a couple different species of echidnas, and these are found in, again, Australia and Tasmania, also New Guinea, which is an island to the north of Australia. Echidnas will have a temporary breeding pouch. So they'll lay 1 egg, and then the young, when hatched, goes into the pouch, and again, milk pools. So there aren't nipples to latch onto. The milk pools in the pouch, and the young drink it from there. And for echidnas, young will remain in the pouch for about 8 weeks after hatching. This is what an echidna looks like, a baby echidna, while still in the pouch. Moving on to marsupials. Marsupials are born super altricial. So they like really can't fend for themselves. There's really only one, well, maybe 2 things they can do. They can crawl, so they're born and they kind of crawl their way into the pouch, and then they can latch, and they latch on and they eat and develop, and that's about all they do for weeks on end. They do not have teeth at all until they're finished suckling. Now, antherians, which are most mammals, right? The placental live birth mammals, they develop in an amniotic sac. And so when we talked about the amniotic egg that reptiles and birds have, it's really pretty similar in mammals, where inside the uterus, it's kind of like the different membranes of an amniotic egg. So there's amniotic fluid, there's the placenta, which kind of acts like for nutrition and for gas exchange. So it's kind of a similar setup to that amniotic egg, but the young is directly connected to the mother. Parental care in mammals is universal. So really all mammals care for their young, but there's a wide range in level of parental care. So the duration and the amount of care varies across species. There are, just like with birds, some mammals are born precocial, some are born altricial. So hares, cetaceans, ungulates are born precocial, where they can move around on their own. They might be able to get food on their own right from birth. A 4-day-old pronghorn can outrun a human. That's kind of pathetic, kind of cool too. Altricial mammals, like small mammals, like this little squirrel, they're born hairless with their eyes closed. They're totally helpless. Sexual maturity, there's again a range in when that happens. For some rodents, it's at several weeks of age. They're sexually mature and can start breeding. Female meadow voles breed at 3 weeks. For other species, the other end of the spectrum, elephants, gorillas, humans, they're not sexually mature until 10 to 15 years of age. All right. Can you compare the different mating systems in mammals? Can you explain delayed implantation and diapause and the adaptive advantage, the why? And can you compare the growth and development of oviparous and viviparous mammals? If not, circle back, watch the parts you need to again. All right, we're ending with trivia today. Of the 3 bear species in North America, which one is the longest lived? Black bear, grizzly bear, or polar bear? What do you think? It's the polar bear. And these numbers are extremes because if you, this might even be captive age, in the wild, having a black bear that's like 15 to 20 years old is ancient, but they're relative ages. So polar bears live the longest. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in class.